We'll wait a few minutes and see who shows up since it's not quite one yet.
Um, on last week, wait, no, not last week. The week before last week, my computer wasn't working,
Okay.
so I couldn't like get on that much.
Okay. So you're basically in the middle of no, you. I don't think you're missing anything at the moment.
Okay.
I'll double check. As since I know Linda's here, have you either of you tried using Power School at all today?
Not today.
I'm sorry, I
I
didn't catch that.
I didn't use it today. It was working yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, mine's like really slow today. Canvas is fine, but I'm just seeing if anyone else ran across that or not.
Oh no, it was fine when I looked at it.
Okay. Yeah, Lily, you're not missing anything at the moment. Um, did you come online for the online session the week before break?
No, cause my computer was acting funny.
Okay. If you want to, it's uploaded to the Weebly site. If you want to look at that, or if you need me to send you the link, I can.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
All right. Wait a couple minutes and see who else shows up. We're up to 4, so can wait a couple minutes. All right. I think we'll go ahead and get going. So, how was y'all's break?
Good.
It felt the same, I guess.
Gotcha. We didn't have a whole lot to go over today. We were only supposed to have met twice if we had a normal week, I guess. So, have it's good to know Marilyn's trying to get in. Trying to think. I think I was trying to ask if any of you guys had looked over the 2 days worth of notes that the warm ups kind of lined up with or not.
No.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll go over them, and I'll take a break about halfway through and see if you guys have any questions. So basically, trying to think, how many of y'all were here? I know Lily wasn't here. Linda, were you here last time we went over stuff?
No.
Okay. Well, let's see. The last time I was here, we started Unit 7, which is the Reconstruction Unit. And it's basically this process, part of it physical, a lot of it social, about how to reunite the two parts of the country now that the Civil War is over. And Johnson was a very unusual president because he was the first president to take over because someone was assassinated. You know, Lincoln was assassinated right at the very end of the war, right after the war. Johnson was Lincoln's vice president as a symbol of unifying the country. Johnson was a Democrat, Lincoln was a Republican. Johnson was from the South, Lincoln was from the North. And so when Johnson becomes president, he agrees with Lincoln's plan of Reconstruction, which is basically go easy on the South, give the South back its power as the 11 separate states with representation in Congress once they meet what was called the 10% plan, where 10% of the white guys in the state would apologize for the war, would swear an oath of loyalty to the Union, and they would get those rights back. Johnson took it a step further and said it doesn't even have to be 10%. Any small group of men in the state who do that will get those rights restored. So very quickly they got those powers back, and those 11 southern states used that power to abuse freed slaves, because the 13th Amendment ended slavery, but there was nothing else in place as to giving African American citizenship, protecting or giving them rights, letting them vote. None of that was addressed. And so these southern states clamped down on that with a series of laws known as black codes. Johnson thought it was fine because Johnson was from the South. He didn't really care about African Americans. In fact, as was in your warm-up yesterday, Johnson had a very infamous quote where he said, "This is a white man's government," to people who complained about what was going on in the South. The only people he really cared about in the South were poor white people. He hated the rich white people in the South because Johnson wasn't one of them. Johnson was born poor and was poor most of his life. He didn't even know how to read until he was in his 20s. And he only learned how to read because his wife was a teacher and she taught him how to read. So he wants the poor whites to do better, but he thinks that blacks are going to compete against them. And so that's why he agrees with the states on keeping African Americans on the bottom. This infuriates the Republicans because, Lincoln, wanted them not only to be free, but right before he died, he gave a speech that said African Americans, won us the war. We wouldn't be a union without them. African Americans who helped in the war need to be given citizenship, be allowed the right to vote. And you have a lot of Republicans in Congress who want to take that a step further and make laws protecting their rights. And, Johnson isn't having any of it. So Johnson starts fighting with Congress when they come back at the end of 1865. They pass a Civil Rights Act the next year in 66 that outlaws the black codes. It gives citizenship to anyone born in the United States, which is meant to help the freed slaves because they were almost all born in the United States, and now they'll be citizens. And it says that anyone who is a citizen has equal rights under the law. So it's going to give them citizenship and say, hey, all citizens need to be treated equal. Johnson vetoes the bill. Congress overrides it, so it becomes law anyway. But the radicals are afraid that there might come a time where, you might have a Congress full of Democrats who are against all these things, and they might, overturn the law with a new law, which you can do. Or they might, someone might sue, like a state might sue and take it up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court might rule it unconstitutionally interfering in the rights of the states. And so they started to come up with an amendment to the Constitution. So if the 13th Amendment frees the slaves, this one's going to be the what amendment?
14th.
14th.
Yep. So we're going to have a 14th Amendment, which is going to be just about the same as the Civil Rights Act. So again, anyone born in the U.S. as a citizen, all citizens have equal rights under the law, and it says that the states have to follow it. And it takes effect in 1868. Johnson doesn't like it, but there's nothing he can do about it. Another thing that the radicals in Congress do is they pass a law known as the Military Reconstruction Act, where Congress says, hey, we're taking over Reconstruction. The president might be the commander in chief, but we have the power of the purse. We have the power to approve presidential appointments. And so it says all of these Confederate states, they didn't handle their stuff well. And so we're going to throw them out of Congress. We're also going to take over the state governments, where the Army is going to be in charge of the southern states. And they're going to set up military districts where you have generals in charge of all of these states. And I'm going to show you a map of that once I pull it up. Some maps are better than others, so just bear with me a moment. Yeah, that's going to work. So that's not what I want. That's what I want. All right. Can you all see the map okay?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, each color on here represents a military district. And if you look on the left side of the map, it shows you which general is in charge of which district. So just making sure you guys can read this okay. Which general is in charge of both North and South Carolina?
I think it says Sickles. I can't.
It is. It is General Sickles. And so there is no governor of North Carolina. There is no Roy Cooper on TV, saying what he's saying. It's just you have General Sickles, and he's got other officers underneath him. So you might have like a colonel in charge of the Piedmont Triad, and another colonel in charge of, the Raleigh area, and another, so the states are all run by the Army. And the Army is going to enforce the radicals' plan for Reconstruction. African Americans are equal in the eyes of the law. And if they want to register to vote, then they're going to help them register to vote. If they're attacked by, racist people in those states, the Army is going to protect them from those attacks as best they can. It's my question to and if the states don't like it, then they have to write new state constitutions, and those constitutions have to allow African Americans the right to vote, and they have to approve of the 14th Amendment. Until all three of those are done, new constitutions, African Americans can vote, ratify the 14th Amendment. Until all three of those are done, those districts are going to stay there. And if you look closely, those dates underneath each state, the top date is the date that they will that they'll follow all three conditions and not have to deal with this anymore. Tennessee, if you see, is left out of all this because their date is so early. They approved all of these things before this came down on them, so they don't have to deal with military rule over their state, because Tennessee was the most cooperative of all 11, which kind of makes sense because the president of the United States Johnson was from Tennessee himself, and so that was like a point of pride for Tennessee back at that time. Questions about how this Military Reconstruction Act works? Because I know some kids kind of get hung up on it. We're good? All right. So now my question to you, are the states going to like this? The southern states, those 10 states?
No.
All right. My question then, following up to that, what are the radicals in Congress going to tell those 10 states when they complain about it? Y'all can guess. I'm not going to jump through the screen and yell at anyone, I promise.
Can you say it again?
Yeah, so what would the radical Republicans tell any of the 10 states who complain about this radical program where the military runs their state?
Suck it up, basically.
I can't hear you that well.
I said to suck it up, basically.
Pretty much, because the radicals are going to tell these states, you know, they're not like Lincoln. They don't want to go easy on the South. The radicals are like, hey, it's your fault this war happened. Y'all fought to keep slavery and you killed 500,000+ Americans. And this is the punishment that you deserve and you get. Johnson doesn't like that. And Johnson is going to resist as best as he can. He's going to fire the Secretary of War, who was a radical that he inherited from Lincoln. Congress kind of figured something like that was going to happen. So while all this bickering was going on, they passed another law that Johnson vetoed, but they overrode it. It's called the Tenure of Office Act. And what the Tenure of Office Act says is if the president wants to fire anybody on the cabinet, Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of War, if the president wants to fire somebody, he has to get permission from Congress. Johnson says that's bullcrap. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that. I'm going to fire Stanton anyway. And so technically Johnson has broken the law. You know, it's a law. You can't do it. And so what does the Constitution say can happen if the president breaks the law?
He can be removed from office?
Correct. And that process is known as
impeachment?
Correct. So for the first time in American history, you have a president who will be impeached for committing a crime. Now, there are 2 steps to impeachment. And if I had money, I'd try to give some away today. You know, I can reach through and, you know, pretend to give it to you, I guess. But there are 2 steps to impeachment. Can anybody name the first step? Happened earlier this year, actually, because Trump was impeached.
Do they like investigate to see what happened?
Okay, so do you remember, Zyra, which part of Congress investigates? You got the House and you got the Senate. So which one does that?
The House?
It is the House. So the House investigates. The House comes to the conclusion that the president has committed a crime. They vote on whether or not they feel he has. the House voted Johnson and Trump committed a crime. So now he is formally charged. He is impeached. Now what's the next second step?
They have to like pass it or something.
I'm sorry, say that again.
They have to pass it.
Well, they already passed it. They passed it in the House. The House is done with the process. So since the House is done with the process, who takes up the second step?
The Senate?
Yes. The Senate holds a trial of the charges. And both sides get to argue whether or not the president is guilty of the charge or innocent of the charge, or if you're the president's defense team, you can argue technicalities, which has been done in, I think, every impeachment. And then after both sides get to say what they want, then the Senate has to vote on it. And if the Senate votes guilty, the president, boom, is out of office. If the president votes not guilty, the president stays in office. All right. Does anyone know what fraction or percentage of the Senate has to vote guilty to kick the president out of office?
All of them.
Not all of them. You will never get 100 senators to agree on something like that.
2/3?
You said 2/3. Linda did. Very good. It is 2/3. It's a high number, but it's not an impossible number. So when they came down to the vote, it came down to one senator. One senator would have taken it over 2/3 and removed Johnson, and it actually came down to the last senator. They asked each senator individually, out loud, how do you vote? And then they recorded the vote, and it was like, yes, yes, no, yes, yes, no, yes, yes, no, kind of like that, all the way down to the very last senator. And this guy from Kansas, they asked him, and if that one guy from Kansas said yes, Johnson would have gone. But the guy from Kansas said no, I don't like Johnson, but I don't think what he did was a crime. And so he got to stay and finish his term. And there's a couple of important parts to that I'll get to in a second. But the Supreme Court ruled about 20 years after this that whole law, the Tenure of Office Act, was unconstitutional anyway. But the important thing about this impeachment, and the reason I'm spending all this time on it, is what that trial shows is if you want to kick a president out of office and you're in Congress, it's not going to work unless you can prove he actually did a crime. That law was a politically based law because they didn't like Johnson. And you don't kick a president out because you don't like him, even if you really don't like him, even if you think he's a bad guy, you kick him out because he legitimately did something that was a criminal matter. Like Nixon did something that was a legitimate criminal matter. And he was going to get convicted. And he knew he was going to get convicted, so he quit. He's the only president who ever quit. Clinton was impeached in the 1990s when I was y'all's age, and he was found not guilty for the same reason. And earlier this year, Trump was found not guilty for similar reason. You remove a president because you can prove he did something criminal, not just because you don't like him. So that's the first example of that. While all this is going on, Congress passed a 15th Amendment to the Constitution. And the last couple of days Johnson was president, it was sent out to the states. Now, the 13th Amendment frees the slaves. The 14th Amendment gives them citizenship. Now, the 15th Amendment is made to protect the most important right in a lot of people's minds of a citizen. And does anyone know what that is?
The right to vote?
Correct. It makes it illegal to deny somebody's right to vote because of their race or if they had been a slave. So Now, legally, all African American men are allowed the right to vote. There is only one large group of people left in the United States who are not allowed to vote. And I think that includes, yeah, it does. It includes all 5 of my students who are here today.
Women.
Correct. They're the only ones left, which is pretty sad. Questions about the first set that I went through? I'll take that as a no. And I'll go through the last set of notes, and I think we'll be able to wrap up. So, Southern society was the other part of Reconstruction. It's not enough to go down and fix all the damage in the South, although that's a big part of it. But you got to change kind of how society works down there, because a lot of it was based on slavery, and slavery's over. So you have 2 political groups in the South that kind of get names attached to them. You got this group of people known as carpetbaggers, which I'm going to try to show you one in a minute. And there we go, that works. All right, let me project that. All right. Can you see the purse that I've got up here?
Yeah.
All right. So back in the day, a lot of people had purses or like suitcases made out of a carpet. You would take a rug in your house, or you would cut out a piece of carpet that like a bookshelf might have been sitting on, and then put the bookshelf on top of the bare spot. You would curl it up, and then you would stitch up the sides, and then you would put a handle on it and with clasps and all that. It was called a carpet bag, because you literally took a carpet and made a bag out of it. So you had a lot of people from the North move down to the South during Reconstruction, and they brought these carpet bags with them, and so Southerners started calling them carpetbaggers, and it was not a compliment. You know, it's an insult to be called a carpetbagger. Like, oh, what's that carpetbagger doing here? He thinks we suck, and he thinks we got to be like them Yankees. And almost all of your carpetbaggers are Republicans. Some of them are trying to help the South fix up its damages and teach, freed slaves and poor white people. But some of them say all those nice things, but then they say, well, it's going to cost money to build a school, or it's going to cost money to build the railroad, and I can't buy supplies on credit. I need cash up front, and people will give them cash, and then guess what? About a third of the carpetbaggers did with the money. Take a guess.
Just took it and ran away with it.
That's exactly what they do. And so you get this bad reputation of a carpetbagger gets even worse. And so, this is where like this hatred toward, the Northerners, digs in even deeper. And then you get another group of people called scalawags. And a scalawag is an old pirate term for somebody who you can't trust because they'll stab you in the back. Are ye a scalawag? I thought I could trust ye. All right. But a scalawag was a word given to white people who were from the South. So, they talk like Southerners, and, they go out barefoot in the summertime and whatnot. But, you thought they would vote for Democrats, but instead they vote for Republicans. And oh my God, how could you vote for those Yankee Republicans? And so they were seen as backstabbers to their own kind. And so white Southern Republicans were called scalawags because they were seen as backstabbers. And when stories come out more and more of people stealing money, and not just people's money, but taxpayer money, this whole Reconstruction thing is going to become less and less popular. Because in 5 years, 6 years, 8 years pass, and we're still spending money on fixing the South, but people hear stories about how the money's getting stolen. You're going to have more and more people up north going to tell their leaders in Washington, I don't think we should be paying for this stuff anymore. The war is over. They've had enough time to fix all their issues down there. Let's get it over with. And that's going to become a problem also, because if Reconstruction ends and the Army leaves the South, who is going to protect African Americans and their rights in the South?
Nobody?
Exactly. And that's one of the saddest stories of Reconstruction is when it is over, there won't be anybody protecting them anymore. And that's a big part of the notes you're supposed to read, I think, for Monday, if I'm not mistaken. Or it might be Wednesday, but next week's notes are big into that. But while Reconstruction's going on, African Americans are going to engage in two major activities. One of them revolves around church. And it's not just, the spiritual aspect, but church was a place where it was safe for African Americans to meet in large groups, speak what was on their mind, which a lot of it was finding their families. Remember, in 12 Years a Slave, when we watched that, how you had, African American families separated a lot and sold off to places they didn't know where. So a lot of times you would try to learn in church, okay, my dad was with, Farmer John, and I don't know where he went to. And somebody in church might say, well, he was at Billy Bob's plantation down the river a ways. And so then, somebody communicates down at that church and they find out he went down to another one, and you start tracking down family members that way. So that was a big one. They also start talking about things that are important in their communities. And this is where you start to get the first African Americans engaged in politics. One of the neatest stories about Reconstruction, I think, is the fact that you have African Americans who were slaves. They were property in the eyes of the law a few years before. And now they become elected members to the United States Congress or to state offices like lieutenant governor or things like that. It's kind of shows, that just where you start in America isn't as important as what you want to do and what steps you'll take to improve your life and improve the lives of people you love. So church has a big role in that. School is another big factor in that because, African Americans were given freedom in the South, but they have no way to start a business. They have no way to, be employed and become a manager and have a good life for themselves without any education. And so you have the Freedmen's Bureau, which is a nice start, but you need to start having access to colleges and universities. And this is when you start to see the first HBCUs appear. A lot of them still exist. A lot of your early ones are like Howard University in Washington, D.C., Shaw University in Raleigh, Fisk University in Nashville, I think. You start to see those pop up during Reconstruction. One of probably the biggest examples of a African American who worked his way up and became well known was Booker T. Washington. Have any of y'all heard of Booker T. Washington?
Yeah.
Okay. For those who are not, I'll show you a picture. You might have seen him, in a hallway or a poster somewhere. Put him up. there's Booker T. Washington. He was born as a slave in Virginia about 5 or 10 years before the war. So when the war is over, he's like middle school age. And he knows he's got to go to school to get somewhere in life. And so he worked in a salt mine, I think it was, in Virginia during the day. And then he took the money he made and paid to go to night school. And he got his high school diploma. And then he kept working that way and went to college. And then once he got his college degree, he said, it's not enough for me to have a college degree. I need to set an example and be a role model for others. And so him and some other people gathered up some money and started their own HBCU in Alabama, which still exists, called the Tuskegee Institute, now known as the Tuskegee College. And basically his message to African Americans is it's important to be treated equal, but that's not going to be a quick fix. What is better right at the moment is to get an education, get a good job where you can provide for yourself, take care of your family, pay your own bills. And the more of us that do that, the more stereotypes will start to break down, because the stereotype was that African Americans could not take care of themselves. They needed white people to help them, and that they didn't want to work hard unless someone was cracking them with a whip. And Booker T. Washington is going to show that is false, and it's going to start to break some of those things down. What's messed up about the whole situation, and the reason that you do need the Army in the South at this time, is you have terrorist groups in the South popping up in the 1860s. I know Linda did the warm-up, Lily did the warm-up, Marilyn, I think, did. So do y'all remember the cartoon that y'all did yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the two most well-known groups. You have the White League, which is so bold they don't even wear disguises. And then you got the Ku Klux Klan, which starts at this time, who wear the hoods and go around at night, and the reason they give, which is mostly crap, is, they say that they represent the Confederate dead. They say that they are going around getting revenge on all the dead people that the South had. All right. But a lot of it's psychological. You get in the heads and intimidate people you don't like. But also, the White League, they're not going to last very long because they're not disguised. What's going to happen to White League people?
They're
People
gonna
are
get
gonna
caught.
kill him.
Yeah, they're going to get caught. They're going to get arrested. They're going to get pursued by the Army. The Klan, since they operate at night and they're in disguise, are going to be harder to catch. So both of them have the same goal. They want to intimidate more than kill and injure. Now, they do kill, they do injure, they do destroy. That was in the cartoon. There was a guy in the cartoon who was lynched. There was a dead baby that the parents were holding. You could tell if you look, the baby's dead because underneath the baby there are blood stains on the ground where the baby was bleeding to death. And then they were burning a schoolhouse because, if you burn the schoolhouse, they won't get educated. They won't learn the rights that Americans are born with. And you don't want African Americans to vote. That's their number one goal. Because if African Americans vote, who are they going to vote for?
I don't know.
Well, it's not the North so much; it's the political parties. You got to remember the political aspect to this. What political party is protecting their rights?
The Republicans.
Correct. and they don't want African Americans to vote for Republicans. You got to keep in mind, too, at this time, not a lot of African Americans lived in the North. So they're almost all in the South. And you have some states where you have more African Americans than white people. And it, like Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, those are the three that quickly come to mind. Louisiana and Georgia, I think, were about 50-50. So if African Americans come out and vote in big numbers, Republicans are going to win those states. And so you want to keep them quiet by literally scaring the crap out of them, by burning houses of African Americans who speak out, by, hurting people, killing people. And so then all the other African Americans will keep their mouths shut and not go out and vote. And it's not only African Americans. Who else are these terrorists trying to shut up?
The Republican?
And who are our other Republicans in the South?
Scallywags?
Scalawags are one.
The carpetbaggers?
And the carpetbaggers are the other. So not only are they doing all these violent acts to African Americans, they're also committing violence on carpetbaggers and scalawags as well. They're hoping to keep enough of these people from voting that Democrats would then gain power back in those states and be able to, reestablish their racist agenda. That was that map I showed you, the date that was underlined. Those are the dates where the Democrats took power back in those states. Now, Johnson leaves office in 1869. Does anyone know who is elected president when Johnson leaves?
No.
Who's your big war hero that everybody still remembers? Because war heroes are often elected president. The most important general for the Union during the Civil War. And I'll wait till one of the five of y'all can figure it
out. I have a name in my head, but I feel like it's very wrong.
Take a guess.
John F. Kennedy?
Kennedy wasn't born yet.
Yeah.
That's okay. Hero of Vicksburg. Last name starts with a G, so it's General G something.
Grant?
Yes. Thanks. So, General Grant, the guy on the $50 bill. He is elected president in '68. He is going to be the last president of the 1800s to be elected to 2 terms in office. He is the big war hero. Everybody in the North is like, yeah, of course he should be president. And so when he becomes president, he is going to go after the Klan in a big way. Guess what party Grant belongs to?
Democrat?
He is not a
Republican?
He is a Republican. Just like Lincoln was. He is not as radical as Congress, but he agrees with Congress that the Klan has to be stopped. And since he's got military experience and the military is down in the South, he is going to use the military to go after the Klan. And that is done through a set of laws known as the Enforcement Acts. And early on in his presidency, that was Grant's number one mission, was to use the army to hunt down the Klan and go after them. And, it's like, well, they're in disguise. How are you going to find them? You'll infiltrate them. You'll have people, who are like from Kentucky or Missouri or Tennessee and speak with Southern accents. And you have them pretend to join up with the Klan. And so you can say, okay, I know this guy, and that guy are all in the Klan, and you arrest them. And so the Klan is going to get very weak under Grant's presidency. One of probably the best things Grant did as president was he went after the Klan and pretty much destroyed it by the time he was done. The Klan that came later is a different Klan. They're going to use the same symbols and a lot of the same methods, but they're different people in the Klan. So, because it's not going to come back for 50 years. It'll be 50 years by the time the Ku Klux Klan tries to come back. And by that time, all the people in the first Klan are dead. And so you have new people, look back and say, well, hey, let's try to make it up again. So that's kind of where we're at. Questions about anything we went over today?
No.
No.
All right. Questions about grades or anything else that's going on while I'm here?
If we're going back to school?
Say that again.
Do you know if we're going back to school or anything?
The governor's supposed to start a press conference in a few minutes to talk about that. He said yesterday that he was going to announce something about it today at 2:00. So that's when I guess we're going to find out. If we come back, the soonest we can come back is May 18th. If we did come back on May 18th, there would only be 8 days of school before graduation. So it'd be pretty tight.
Oh, okay.
Are the grades for this quarter gonna actually count, if we pass or not?
Part of what they announced yesterday is kind of what we had been doing anyway. Since y'all are in a year-long class, I think all of you guys passed the first semester. Like when you all went home for Christmas, all of you guys were passing. And so since y'all are in a year-long class, that was going to determine whether or not you passed or failed the course. And anyone who is not graduating, who is either in a year-long class or a spring semester class, has a choice whether to take the grades that they earned for quarter 3 and quarter 4 and have them count toward their GPA. Anything that was done after March 12th or 13th cannot bring your grade down. It can only help your grade. That's why I kept the grades in Power School, because some people in our class right now, and a lot of you all are in that group, where your quarter 4 grade is actually helping your overall grade. And if it does, you can let me know and you can keep that grade and it will help your GPA. If it doesn't help your grade, then you can keep the grade you earned for the first semester and have that count. If you're in a semester-long class like English 3 that only meets in the spring, then it's just reduced down to that. Your quarter 3 grade would determine whether you pass the course or fail the course. But if you don't want that grade to be part of your GPA, you just tell the teacher, I want to be graded on pass fail. And if you're graded on pass fail, then they would just say you passed the class. If you failed the class because you got a 52, then you can do the work at home to bring your grade up over a 60 and then say, I want to be graded on pass fail. But I think a lot of these grades have to be finalized for all of that. I think mostly for the seniors, but for some people, I think they want it by the end of the month. So, some of that's still getting shaken out, but those are the basics of it. Because the seniors who don't have enough credits, they have to try to give them ways that they can still graduate on time. If they don't have enough credits, those are the ones they're most worried about. Anything else?
When are all the packets due? Like, when is the last day we can turn up? Like, not just for this class, but like everything.
Like like all the work for all the classes.
Yeah, because I've got an email that we're supposed to turn them in next Thursday.
Yeah,
next
Thursday. Yeah, next Thursday is April 30th. That's when I think they want to know who's passing or who's failing. So they're probably going to ask me who's passing and who's failing on April 30th. So if you're on the edge or if you're worried about it or if you want your GPA to come up and use those grades to help, I would try to get anything missing for this quarter done by then so I can let them know. Now, I'm still going to be teaching and doing these assignments just because, I want to teach. You guys are here, hopefully wanting to learn something. So like the first week or week and a half of May, I'm still going to be teaching Unit 7, but I don't think it's going to really mess up your grade after April 30th, if that makes any sense.
All right.
Anything else? If there's not, I'll see you guys a week from today, which is May 1st. Of course, I've got office hours for individual questions or concerns next Tuesday and Thursday at 3 o'clock. If you want to do a video session, of course, you can email me anytime. I try to get back with those quickly. And I'll see you guys later.
Bye.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.